Intel's Falcon just won't fly. NVIDIA supercharges storage. MS Fish stories. Hubbell vies for Ventev. FinOps focus, and we're going to take a closer look at the DoJ Juniper hijinks in this episode of the Gestalt IT Rundown. Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday, February the 5th, and I want to welcome everybody to the Gestalt IT Rundown. And if you've opened up a window or looked out your door, you've probably seen that the weather's being weird. Well, you should thank your local weather person, because today is National Weather Person's Day. And coming from the home of the National Severe Storms Laboratory, those are some very important people. So make sure you thank them, even if the weather isn't so great. What is great, though, is that I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Alistair Cook. Al, I know the weather's a little weird in your neck of the woods because it's exactly backwards from where it is up here.
Well, that's why we're standing on our heads all the time down here in New Zealand. And that makes the weather go backwards, so it is indeed still summertime for us here. Although, apparently it was the same temperature for me yesterday as it was for you, which was 80 of your freedom units or 27 of our science degrees. Quite warm.
Good news is that no matter what temperature it is, we have the hottest news of the week that isn't about some kind of AI platform. And we're going to be bringing that to you right now because we have a lot of stories lined up that we can't wait to bring you. The first one is actually kind of a big deal because during Intel's Q4 2024 earnings call, it was announced that they will not be releasing their current generation GPU, which of course is codenamed Falcon Shores. This project had been in development for over 3 years, and industry analysts have lamented that the chipmaker seems to have fallen behind the competition. Falcon Shores was supposed to be the entry point for Intel to claw their way into the AI GPU accelerator market. Now, if you were a fan of some of our sister shows like the 6.5 Live, you may have heard co-hosts Daniel Newman and Pat Moorhead talking about the fact that Falcon Shores was Intel's last chance to make a splash in this market, given all of the struggles that the chip giant has faced over the last 12 to 18 months. But it looks like things are not going to be all beaches for everybody. So, Al, does this news bode ill for Intel's future fortunes?
Well, I certainly don't think it's a great thing that they have again cancelled another of these products that they were going to bring in that was going to revolutionize the GPU market. Falcon Shores was going to add silicon photonics in, and we've been hearing about silicon photonics as being the next big thing for, at least a decade. So I'm kind of concerned that all of these things come together and don't deliver something awesome and amazing. Now, to be clear, Intel is still delivering awesome and amazing. It's just that we keep seeing these cancellations of GPU products and difficulties with competing against NVIDIA as the headline, but AMD as well. So Intel seems to be hanging all of its future in the GPU space on Gaudi 3, which seems to be okay, although not setting the world on fire. And maybe on what follows Falcon Shores. I mean, the best hope is that Falcon Shores is a development product that never gets shipped to customers. And that, I guess, is a little better than a development product that does get shipped to customers and then cancelled. So let's count our blessings here that we don't have that muddying the water. But really, it continues the story of Intel not quite getting into the GPU space, not really coming out and being the powerhouse that we knew Intel to be 10 years ago. So yeah, I'm quite concerned about the future for Intel. It's not showing us that positive arc we want to see in leadership and compute. And it's the return of storage networking. NVIDIA had a big announcement this week using Spectrum-X to speed up the data storage fabric. One of the key features is using adaptive routing to prevent flow collisions and route around congestion in the storage infrastructure. If you're worried about data bits arriving out of order, have no fear. NVIDIA BlueField 3 SuperNICs can hold on to those pieces and reassemble them in the proper order for presentation to the host system without any impact. Spectrum-X is an Ethernet solution, allows RDMA traffic to be sent over Rocky V2, and testing of the newest features has increased read performance up to 48%, and write bandwidth increased up to 41%. Tom, this is storage and networking joined together. Is this great news in networking?
I think this is proof positive that the future of AI development is not going to be dependent upon InfiniBand. When you look at the moves that NVIDIA has been making with Spectrum X and Bluefield 3 and this entire system together, I think they've realized that they've hit a ceiling with InfiniBand. And we know why that is, right? Is because InfiniBand was designed to scale out for HPC, but it had a realistic limit of, a few tens of thousands of nodes. And we're going to get way bigger than that. And so seeing the way that this system is performing and, seeing the massive increases, this kind of tracks with what we had talked about. I think it was last year when I recorded my, what's the deal with InfiniBand show on our Conversations here on the Gestalt IT YouTube channel. But the short version is that there is a ceiling for InfiniBand's performance. It's high, but it is a ceiling. Whereas Ethernet is playing catch up, but as Ethernet always does, it can get massively good performance with some tweaking. And I think that the piece that is really helping this is the Bluefield 3 DPUs. They're calling them Super NICs, but you probably have heard them as DPUs or IPUs or something like that. Effectively, what's happening is that these DPUs are sitting in the systems and they are offloading all of the network processing so that the host CPU doesn't have to deal with that. Because if the host CPU gets overrun, then the whole system shuts down. And this is something that we've seen a lot from other companies that are developing these things. I know, we covered a story on the rundown a couple of years ago where Amazon was effectively using their Nitro DPUs to get rid of TCP, and because it was a performance bottleneck. And we're starting to see that here too. They're doing native Rocky v2 to be able to get these data packets back and forth. And 40% increased performance for read and write is nothing to sneeze at. I think that it's an exciting time because we're seeing the ascendancy of Ethernet across all media. The trick, though, is that this is NVIDIA specific. So for those of you who've been keeping track at home, there is the NVIDIA way of doing things. And then there is the Ultra Ethernet Consortium, which is basically everybody who's not NVIDIA. And they are trying to figure out a way to square those two things. I think, at least for the foreseeable future, since NVIDIA kind of has the stranglehold with InfiniBand right now, we're going to continue to see massive performance increase in Ethernet through NVIDIA because they are kind of the gorilla in the market. I think Ultra Ethernet will continue to develop as they have been, and we will see some interesting counterpoints. But for right now, I think that this is NVIDIA's ball to run with, and I honestly can't wait to see what they can do when they get it to run flat out across a fabric. It looks like some hackers got their phishing license a little bit early this year, and the target is Microsoft's legacy Active Directory Federation Service, or ADFS. This is a single sign-on solution that allows more than one system to be accessed with a single set of credentials. Given that the story involves phishing, you want to guess how they're using it? Did you say spoofed login pages? How about tricks for entering two-factor authentication codes? Well, guess what? You're right. The attacks use some very well-crafted email and some link obfuscation, and that's snaring some of the most diligent security-minded people out there. According to researchers at firm Abnormal Security, the targets for these attacks appear to be in the education sector. I know that single sign-on is something that a lot of people love, but are we running into problems where some of the legacy SSO allows people to just kind of snag what they want?
Seems that we are. Now, ADFS is a way of using your on-premises Active Directory and having your users sign in using those credentials and access resources somewhere else. I spent a little while working at a university a couple of years ago, and one of my responsibilities there was maintenance of their ADFS system. Well, there's connections out to sources of research papers and collaboration between the different institutions. Even just simple connectivity to software as a service applications like the booking a rental car through the university. All of this passed through ADFS. And so in some ways, this was the sort of golden center, the most critical element of the infrastructure, at least for authentication infrastructure. So I can absolutely understand this being attacked by phishing attacks, and that historically it's probably been very well protected from phishing attacks, only state-of-the-art moves on, and the development for this single sign-on from Microsoft has been focused around Entra ID on Azure rather than around ADFS. And certainly the university I worked at was progressively migrating everything off on-premises ADFS and onto Entra ID, where you get that larger security operations from Microsoft around it. So yes, I think we are seeing more vulnerability or more identified vulnerability in these on-premises single sign-on solutions that have been around for a long time, that are very accessible. Anybody could build their own ADFS environment to test it out for attack. It's a lot harder to build out and see the insides of an Entra cloud service authentication. I did find it interesting that these ADFS attacks were using it seemed to be a man-in-the-middle kind of behavior where they were capturing single sign-on details as well as the username password. Often it's a time-based single sign-on that's used with ADFS, and that would lead to potential this man-in-the-middle requirement in order to compromise an account, and that they were very cleverly then throwing up some messages that said, we need you to further authenticate, and handing you off to the final destination. So it obscured the fact that your credentials had been acquired and that your account potentially had been compromised. Definitely is a bit of a wake-up call for organizations that have no plans about how they're going to move from ADFS to potentially a more robust single sign-on. And I'm pretty sure that university has retired out almost all of their ADFS where they could. Probably good advice for other organizations too. Yesterday, the news broke that Ventev is being acquired by Hubbell Incorporated of Delaware. Ventev, a major manufacturer of wireless antennas and mobile technology, was formerly a part of Tesco. Hubbell has a large range of technologies for enterprise IT, and Ventev is expected to continue their focus under the new organization, building out these wireless antennas and mobile technology. Tom, does this come as a surprise, or are we expecting Ventev to find itself in a new home?
I'll be honest with you, this was a little bit of a shock to me when the news broke, literally right before we started recording this, that this acquisition took place. But when you look at it on the surface, this is actually, I think, a really good move for the people over at Ventev. Now, Ventev is a company that has presented at Field Day many times, and we have had some great presentations from folks like Dennis Burrell and Jared Van Allen and some other great folks. And they've talked about a variety of things. And a lot of people, when they hear Ventev, they think, oh, the antenna company. But they're more than just antennas. They have full mobile kit solutions for doing remote power and, basically kind of like an AP in a box. If you need to light up a festival or a parking lot party or something like that, they can do it. And when you look at where the division is in the companies, Tesco, which is the company that formerly held Ventev, was very well focused on the mobility side of things, private 5G and that kind of stuff. When you look at Hubbell, they do a lot of infrastructure pieces, right? They make racks, they make the infrastructure, right? Like when you walk into a data center, they don't make the servers, they make everything the server go into. And they do a lot of electrical and stuff like that. So I think that ultimately this is probably a better fit for the people at Ventev because they are part of that infrastructure piece. They're the company that you go to, you're like, okay, I bought this new thing and now I need to make it reach further and mount on the wall and run off of battery whenever the power goes out. And that is like a one-stop shop for them. Hubbell's been doing this for over 100 years. And I know that sounds really weird to think about, these kinds of solutions being 100 years old, but we kind of really are there. IT has been around for a while, and even before we had computers, it was necessary to be able to build out power for industrial things. And now, in going into the future, we have these small form factor IoT devices and stuff like that, and connectivity is even more important there. And I'll say this: Dennis has done an amazing job continuing to shrink the access point antennas. He's running out of science unit prefixes to describe how small they are. Pico, femto, atto. He's going to have to start inventing some new words. So bravo to the Ventev team. I can't wait to see where this goes next. And I know that we're going to be hearing a lot more about it, hopefully very soon at one of the shows that they are famous for being a part of. Strangely, the majority of respondents to an Aptio survey are expecting an increased IT budget, but unsurprisingly, demand for new services is being outstripped by pretty much any budget increase they might get. The combination of unpredictable cloud costs, huge AI build-out costs, and a host of legacy hardware and software costs present big management headaches. This seems to be a problem, and it's ideal for a software-based solution since it deals with data. But Alistair, I have to ask, does this mean that FinOps is about to get hot, hot, hot?
Seems a little odd, doesn't it, that FinOps is suddenly coming on our horizons, because we've always tried to stay away from this idea that we need to think too closely about our costs. Or have we? Have we always had to consider costs? And I think the challenge in here is that we've got this mismatch between cycles. So we have the everything on demand, everything as you use it, and pay for it as you use it in the cloud. The wonderful thing about the cloud is you only pay for what you use, and the terrible thing about the cloud is you pay for everything you use. So predictability is hard there, and we're used to on-premises where we'd buy something and run it for 5 years and then replace it, or here in semi-rural New Zealand, 7 to 10 years and then replace it. And that software was bought in the same way. It was bought on these relatively long life cycles. Combining these together has been really problematic, but I think the forcing function on this has been AI. Both that huge cost to build out a large AI infrastructure that weren't in any of those budgets that we had from years ago, but also there's an interesting element where there's an expectation that AI is going to reduce our costs in IT, and that we're going to be able to use AI to become more efficient at doing things. So there's a whole raft of kind of competing elements in this cost. I was really surprised to see that we're actually expecting budget increases. We usually expected to do more with the same or less money, but so some increases in budget is good. However, we're going to have to show returns on that increase in budget. And this is where the FinOps part comes in, is making sure that when we're spending money, we're getting value for that money, and that spending more money might provide us more value, and this is an element of FinOps, and maybe where we're spending money and not getting value, we need to stop. So I think FinOps has always been important, but I think it's also becoming an area where it's got to be much more sciencey because of the speed of change of things that are going on at the moment. Particularly utilization of cloud resources you go up and down week by week, hour by hour. This is not a human response thing, and so the financial management part of it needs to also happen at the speed of software. I think we will see a lot more interest in FinOps, and particularly hybrid cloud FinOps tools. We've seen cloud alone FinOps tools quite a bit, but not so much hybrid, and I think that's where we will see quite a lot more interest in the coming months and years. One of the challenges for installing Windows 11 has been the requirement for a trusted platform module, a TPM2 chip, in the system. Microsoft had previously provided some guidance on how to get around this particular hiccup in their official installation information. Interesting. And some developers had even made automation tools that bypassed this TPM check and allowed you to use an older TPM 1.2 module instead of the TPM2 that's supposed to be required. This week, Microsoft decided that wasn't a good idea and removed that documentation and said, you really shouldn't be avoiding this check. You should be using a TPM2 module. And then Windows Defender started flagging one of those automated tools. They flagged Flyby 11, which is a tool to avoid exactly this check. It's now being flagged as malware by Defender as part of that upgrade process. Users on Windows 10 must now decide if they want to buy a new system with a compatible TPM, or let their operating system, Windows 10, fall out of support at the end of 2025. Tom, are you buying new machines with TPM2 modules, or are you considering keeping Windows 10 in play?
Let's roll those dice, baby. What's the worst that could happen? It's not like there's a security exploit or anything like that. Fun fact, I actually ran into a TPM problem on my motherboard of the desktop that I use. I enabled it thinking, oh, I'll upgrade to Windows 11. And then I had a power outage and had to reboot my system. And through an hour and a half of troubleshooting, it turned out that the only way to get my system to come back up, even though everything looked like it was there, was to disable the TPM. And suddenly the hard drive booted again. I don't know what was going on, but I do know what's going on in Redmond. They're not seeing the same response to this kind of pull through that they were expecting. When the Windows 11 guidelines came out, they're roughly the same with Windows 10. I mean, nothing earth shattering. You don't need to be running an octa-core CPU with a terabyte of RAM and 4 terabytes of hard drive space to be able to install an operating system. But you did need a TPM, and that put some people off. Now, this is not a big deal for people who buy laptops, because almost every laptop has a TPM integrated into it, and there's nothing you can do about that. But for people who build their own desktops, the hobbyists, enthusiasts, whatever, they're not 100% sold on TPMs. Or if they do, they might actually pay $50 left on the motherboard just to not have a TPM on it. Problem is that Microsoft really wants to integrate features that require TPM to be enabled. And that's things like, the online accounts and the encryption and all that other stuff. But also the fact that they really want people in Windows 11 to take advantage of all of those really cool AI features that they have invested billions and billions of dollars into. So how do we do that? Well, we've got to get people to want to buy new hardware, whether it's those new laptops that include those NPUs or whether it's desktops that require those kinds of things. We really need to get people to adopt that. Well, why are people not adopting it? Well, they really want to run Windows 10. Okay, well, there's always going to be a group of people that are want to stay on the old version of Windows. If you don't believe me, how many of you upgraded from 7 to 8? How many of you upgraded from XP to Vista? Okay, you can put your hands down. I believe you. But more importantly, Microsoft cannot be seen as talking out of both sides of their mouth. I want you to upgrade, but I absolutely cannot put rules on my site or descriptions of things on my site to allow you to bypass a security check, because if you don't have a TPM, my updates could fail. And I'm beginning to wonder if maybe some of the recent issues that we've seen with some of these Windows 11 updates that have been going bad as they've been deployed is because people have been bypassing the TPM in order to get Windows 11 installed so they can continue to have support. But I don't know for sure. I can tell you what it looks like from the outside. It looks like Microsoft is trying to drive a hardware refresh, and that's going to put a lot of people off. Not everybody can afford $2,000 for a brand new GPU to play video games, and then where am I going to make up the difference? Well, I've already got a monitor. I already have some storage space. I guess I'll cheap out on the board or something. So Microsoft really needs to kind of decide how they want to go about doing this, and this is not a good look, especially with the fact that Flyby 11 is being flagged as malware in Windows Defender. Like, I could have believed this if they removed the instructions and quietly told people to stop bypassing it. But the fact that you're actively trying to discourage people from doing that tells me that there's something else going on, and you really need to get a handle on this before it kind of blows up in your face.
It's time for us to take a closer look. We heard the rumours back in November that the HPE deal to acquire Juniper Networks was getting a closer look from the Department of Justice. Last week, we got confirmation that the DoJ will be filing a suit to halt the deal. The argument from the government is that the result of the deal will be 70% of the market for networking equipment being held by just 2 companies. Specifically cited was the wireless LAN component, where the DoJ said there were only 3 major players. This was refuted quickly by both HPE and Juniper. The UK Competition and Markets Authority and the EU have both cleared the deal. Tom, let's start with you. What's going on here? Why is this water so muddy?
Man, you wonder what is going on. And I think there's really 2 things at play here. The first thing is that this is actually a carryover from what was going on before presidential administration change happened. We knew that the deal was going to be looked at by around Thanksgiving, mid-November of last year. I would hazard a guess that the current presidential administration actually doesn't know what's going on here. I think that this is probably the result of enforcement actions that were planned 3 months ago that are just being executed now. There's no coincidence that this deal has actually been announced roughly 1 year to the day that the announcement of the acquisition was made in the first place. Not really that surprised there. So this is the traditional government feeling like they need to have their say in what's going on, because we can't just rubber stamp all of these acquisitions, because a lot of them have blown up in their faces and those kinds of things. So that's part 1. Government needs to say that they at least tried to get the deal negotiated under better terms. 2, I don't see how the text of the order from the DoJ can be squared with the reality of the situation. So they specifically called out the fact that there are really only 2 major network manufacturers right now that have 70% of the market, Cisco and HPE. The other 30% are probably really, really mad right now, and I don't blame them. They specifically cited the fact that Juniper missed access points along with HPE Aruba Networking and Cisco Catalyst are the 3 dominant players in the market. Fortinet, Ruckus, Extreme, Arista, Ubiquity. I just named 5 more, kiddos. And that was off the top of my head. Have you asked them how they feel about this? Because I know for a fact Ruckus will have a very strong opinion about whether or not they consider there to really only be 3 players in the market. I understand the pushback against this deal. Some of my friends in the wireless space are vehemently opposed to this deal because they believe that it will ultimately make things worse for the customers. And I see that perspective, right? How can things be better when 2 companies that are competing against each other are suddenly one company? But I don't see a remedy for this that doesn't involve like adjusting the purchase price or agreeing to something else, because there's been some talk about the only way to get this deal approved is to divest Mist. Kids, that's the only reason this deal's going through. Look, I get it. Everyone's like, oh, well, HPE buying Juniper really augments their data center switching and allows GreenLake to have much more of this. Okay, great. And then they pick up the service provider market, which is like a cash stream, whatever. We know what the deal is. They want Mist. They want Marvis. They want Marvis and Central. Like, that's the thing. And there's a lot of other counterplay going on behind the scenes here, not the least of which is if you listen to the people who are Juniper fans who historically have been very touchy when it comes to Cisco, they believe that Cisco has been lobbying against this deal so that HPE Juniper cannot be the clear number 2 in the market to take them on. Al, how does it look to you?
Well, I'm a little outside of the whole business on here. I thought it was very interesting that some of the criteria from the DoJ was that HP had previously had to discount their products in order to compete with Mist, and that was really their criteria for doing the investigation. When I first heard of the deal, it was painted as looking at AI networking, that the Juniper AI networking was supposed to be what this whole deal was about, what HPE wanted to acquire from this Juniper acquisition for, what was it, $14 billion? Yeah, it never quite made sense to me that it was about data center AI, and I wonder just how this will finish out playing. It may, as you say, just be that the Department of Justice wants to flex some muscles and say that they are actually in control here, and that they will then say, yes, actually, this is all good, but you have our permission to go ahead, rather than it was a given that we would because everybody else had said this was a good deal. Big acquisitions are always tough. They're always a huge risk for all parties involved, and particularly for customers. And I can understand there being quite a lot of customer discomfort around this consolidation. HPE has made quite a lot of acquisitions of new technology rather than building their own over the years. And we've seen them build up quite a stable of networking components that they didn't have going back 10 years ago. So, this has definitely been building strength for HPE. But in terms of destroying competition, particularly in wireless networking, as you say, there's plenty of other players out there who are definitely competitive in the space and definitely have their own differentiations. I wonder if there'd have been the same kind of opposition if HPE had been acquiring a combination of Ruckus and Ubiquity in order to get into some of the spaces where maybe they're not quite as focused. Maybe that would have been easier to acquire and not led to this bump along the road. But I think this is just a bump, and that in the end, the acquisition is going to go ahead. Tom, do you think this really is the end of this acquisition?
No, I think this is going to go through. Unfortunately, the damage that this would cause to Juniper if it did not go through is catastrophic. This will happen. And Stephen Foskett said as much on TechStrong Gang yesterday. He thinks that this is just a little bit more positioning. We got to sweeten the deal a little bit. The current presidential administration in the U.S. has historically been merger friendly with large companies, so I don't think that we're going to run into any issues there. Maybe they have to agree to like a competition hold on something or what have you. I think ultimately this will happen. One thing I will point out here is that the original startup Mist Systems, when they were first being developed, was actually a spin out that was backed by John Chambers. And a lot of people believed at the time that it was going to be spun back into Cisco, like so many of their other startup ideas, and that this was essentially going to take over their wireless department. And the acquisition timing just so happened to be right after John Chambers retired from Cisco as CEO and chairman of the board. Chuck Robbins came on and decided he wasn't going to do that. No more spin outs, no more spin ins. You'll notice this is also the time when Mario Mazzola, Prem Jain, Luca Caffiero, and Sunny Giandani, the MPLS crew, finally left Cisco for the last time. They went out, they developed the technology Pensando, which was later acquired by HPE and became a huge part. Actually, no, that's not true. It was not acquired by HPE. It was acquired by AMD. It was in HPE switches. The Pensando DPU was included in there. I thought it was going to be acquired by HPE, and that's actually, it ended up going to AMD. But a lot of people were saying, well, is this sour grapes from Cisco deciding that they missed out on Mist, so they're going to just basically wreck it in the hopes that maybe they can buy the shattered remnants of the company? I don't think it'll be quite that bad. Let's be fair. If Juniper can survive Elliott Capital Management having a stake in their company, they're survivors. But this is a little bit too big to come back from. I think that the adjustment will happen. There's too many people that are already seeing this as a done deal. The fact that HPE and Juniper both put out a joint statement talking about how ridiculous this is tells me this is going to happen. But the important thing to remember is that when it finally does happen, hopefully before October when the deal expires, you'll hear about it here on the Gestalt IT Rundown, because that's what we do every week as we cover news. Well, I say every week. Usually one of us is out doing something, and next week that's going to be me, because I am going to be hanging out in Amsterdam. And because I don't want to wake up at 2 a.m. to record the rundown, you get to have Alistair and Stephen back with you. But I hope that you'll check us out, especially if you're on the East Coast, because we're going to be broadcasting starting at 1 p.m. Central European time every day. So that's like 8 a.m. Eastern. Tune in, check us out, techfieldday.com, and then take a nap over the weekend, because Al's going to be back with more great stuff the next week.
Yeah, the next week I'll be in Santa Clara, and I'll be hosting Cloud Field Day 22. We've got a great lineup of presenting companies there, and we have an awesome lineup of delegates who are going to be attending. And Cloud Field Day 22, February 19th and 20th, of course, live streaming on all of the usual wonderful Tech Field Day places. And then after Tom's had a bit more of a nap, I'll hand the baton back to him, because the same days in March, he's back again with more networking.
Oh, yeah, we're not going to miss this. We have an exciting networking field day going on. There's a lot of buzz that's going on in Silicon Valley that week around some other companies, but don't worry, we're going to be bringing you some great presentations from companies like BT, Selector AI, and more. Stay tuned to techfieldday.com for more information about that. And while you're over there, check out the event schedule that we've got going on, because I promise you there is an event coming up that will spark your interest. There are companies that are participating in those events that you're not going to want to miss. And if you don't want to miss anything that we do, you need to bookmark some sites. You need to check out the Gestalt IT YouTube channel for the video of the rundown. You need to bookmark gestaltit.com, where we publish the show notes and articles that we use as we reference the riffs that we make on all of these fun stories. Make sure you check out techstrong.tv, where all of the field day videos live. And make sure you check out futuregroup.com, where we pull some of the analysis from some of our amazing coworkers. And don't forget that we publish a new episode every Wednesday, afternoon-ish time, give you a chance to have an afternoon coffee, maybe an espresso, who knows. But we will be back with more great news of the week. Al and Stephen will be joining you next week, and then I'll be back the week after that. Until then, make sure that you check out all of the great stuff that happens at TechStrong TV and GestaltIT.com. And if you have any news that you want us to cover, you know where to find us. We're all over social media. We're all over the web. And we would love to hear what you have to say about that. So leave a comment on this video and let us know if you think that our take on some of these news stories is right on or completely off base. For Al, for Tom, for Stephen, and the rest of the great crew here, take care of yourselves, enjoy your February, and don't let the weather stress you out.